people who invest in rentals fail. And not just the people who never invest, like never get started, right? We hear that. We hear in a lot of situations, there's some really common answers, and that's not what we're going to talk about in this video today. We might cover them a little bit as those questions come up. And after we talk about why so many people fail in real estate, we're going to go to the questions in the comments. That's why we're doing this live. We have Dana, the CEO of Hemlane. I am a small-time mom and pop landlord. I have 18 rental units. I've been retired for about 2 years. So I don't know everything. I know why the people I have encountered have failed. And because I was hunting for the reasons people fail before I retired, because I was afraid of failing and having to go back to work. But Dana, on the Hemlane platform, you have over 4,000 landlords and over 28,000 rental units. So that is a mountain of information. And I always say thank you for coming to share your knowledge with us.
Great, thanks. And I love it. I love talking to landlords every day, real estate investors, those just starting out, and then those that have been successful in doing it for a long time. So thanks for having me.
Cool. And we've got some people in the chat today. Frank invested before 2008 and is investing again now. And Michelle just finished a 1031 and has several rentals. And then we've got Chester, who just closed on his first rental. So we've got the spectrum in the chat already as we get started. So the first, I'll let you start since you're the guest. So you have 4 or 5 reasons why investors fail in rentals, and I've got 4. So and we're not going to cover, my goal is to not cover the real basic ones we hear all the time of not having enough reserves, being over-levered, doing it all themselves, or having a lack of patience. Like I've seen videos with all of those, and we might have some of those mixed in with ours. What's your first reason that you see with all of the information you have?
Yeah. So education, I think, is really important. And so I tried to put it into my reasons into things that you will remember. So my first one is that they watched HGTV once and they thought they knew the Burr method. And so one thing I would say about that is just continue to remember HGTV. That's not going to get you success. You really need the right network and the right experience. So much more tactical education, like listening to Dion Talk and others as well. And then also making sure you have the right boots on the ground and you're asking them the right questions. Usually I've found, especially with contractors, if you're doing any renovations, if you're doing it yourself, some of the worst ones have 0 reviews out there because they know where your properties are. They know who you are. And so you really need to get a lot of referrals and say, have you worked with this person? What was your experience? And build up your network that way. And so I think, watching those shows is fun, but it kind of reminds me of Real Housewives of whatever. You don't really want to take any of it too seriously.
Yeah. And so I like the way you say a person watches HGTV once and then does this. And I think it's the person who watches HGTV for 5 years consistently, 3 episodes a week from different shows, and then has this perception of how it works. Because I won't name him, but I've interacted with somebody who has their own HGTV show, and
Okay. Yeah.
he has explained, here's how many deals I've done, and these deals make money and everything. But here's the 10 episode series we did for HGTV this year, and I lost about $50,000 on each deal because we had to line up the production with the filming, with
Yeah.
the weather, with the whatever. And so what you're actually seeing on there, not only are those not good deals, not good numbers, not realistic timeline, but it's literally made for TV. And then you mentioned, watching the right education. I think if you have like the lumberjack landlord, millennial Mike, one rental at a time, the person who watches that for years and sees the actual real problems they're dealing with in real time and the solutions is going to have a better chance. And on that note, so the education is so important. I think the first thing that I think that makes I've seen the people who failed, and I almost failed, because they have the wrong mentors. A lot of investors go to a friend or family member who is a real estate agent or a lender, maybe even an investor, and says, hey, I want to get into real estate. And they think this is a mentor. They work in the industry. What could go wrong? The lender's job is to sell loan products, and the real estate agent's job is to close on deals. Neither one of them are in your situation with your resources, with your end goals. And I've time after time, I've seen people. My sister, she's a realtor, so I'm buying a house through her, and she says it's great because curb appeal and age of
Yeah.
building and square footage and all these things that don't matter to renters. They
Yep.
matter to owners. Um, so and so that's the specifics of the mentors, but the other thing is the overall mentorship. Most of us interact with 99% of people who are broke. They're working a long career for a pension. They're putting into Social Security. They work until they're 65 or 70. And so our information sources tend to be from people, our parents, our uncles and aunts who are broke. And now we have YouTube University where you can actually sit on a Thursday night on a lumberjack live stream for 2 hours and ask questions and just hang out with him and get information from somebody who has a portfolio 10 times the size of mine, cash flow 10 times the size of mine. I would call him more successful if he didn't have like 19 kids under 5 right now. But yeah, so that was my first one. What's your second?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that one. I love that one because real estate, a lot of people think of it as like this get rich quick and then use the wrong resources to get there. My next one, of course, I have to have one about Excel. This one is they installed white carpets in a pet-friendly unit. And so what I mean by that is Excel will be your best friend. Always model it out and don't use emotions over making practical decisions. And so if you install white carpets, it's like, how much do those cost? How much more frequently do those need to be replaced? How much more could you get with a pet? Okay, maybe you should accept pets, but maybe not the white carpets. And so just really making sure that you're writing everything out and that everything makes practical sense. And there's always that question, but why? Why would you do that? And if someone has a really good rebuttal for it, probably not the right decision to make.
The pet thing always gets me, right? Because we do say pet friendly, and
Mhm.
some rentals aren't.
Yeah, exactly. What's your next one?
And so on the pet thing, I
Oh, yeah.
think so. Like I said, this I'm trying to not go with no reserves or not enough reserves, being over levered, doing it all themselves, lack of patience. These are the ones outside of that list. I don't even know that I've mentioned this in a video as far as these are mistakes to make. I try not to do this, and I've seen people tear their hair out for trying to do this, but I've seen investors try to control their tenants.
Yeah.
And so much so that they're like, I don't want pets because pets will cause damage, right? So I don't want kids because kids will cause damage, but they're legally protected or whatever. So they'll say no pets. Then they get angry that the tenant shows up with an ESA letter that they printed out off the internet after 5 minutes
Yep.
of research. So you have to let them in, and now you can't charge a pet fee, and you can't charge a pet rent,
Deposit.
right?
Yeah.
You can't do any of that. So, and then I hear this one all the time, and I can honestly tell you, I don't know and I don't care how many people live in my rentals. Like, I know there's not 5 families jammed in there because I could see how many cars or whatever, but how I've seen questions over and over and over. I do the live stream every Tuesday at 4 p.m., which I'll be doing this afternoon. And I get the question, my tenant had their cousin move in. He's been living there like 3 months. What do I do? Like, I don't know if I said it, but the answer is don't care. Right?
Yeah.
Are you paying for the utilities? Sure, adjust the lease. But as much as possible, all of my utility costs are on the tenant, so I don't care who lives there. Uh, and it's almost like I think there's some conscious belief that if there's 4 people in the house versus 5 people in the house, when they move out in 5 years, there's going to be more damage because there was a fifth person living there. And I don't think that's how the world works. I've not seen it in any of my rentals. The most damaged, messed up, destroyed unit that I've had to deal with had one, no, it was the wife lived there part-time. So it's like 1.5 people living in the place. It
Yeah.
wasn't a bunch. So don't try to control your tenants because that will just frustrate you.
Yeah.
And if you've had teenagers, you know that
Yeah.
trying to control anybody frustrates you.
Totally. I mean, one person with a hoarding disability is much worse. I think with the multiple tenants, one thing I do like about it is then when you get to the rent increase, there's more salaries to go around, or someone loses their job and you have 2 other people who can pick it up for them. And so I found that as long as you make them jointly responsible, on the lease and say, hey, I'm not your mother. You guys get in a disagreement. You guys have to figure it out. I'm not going to step in. I found that actually having more people can help mitigate quite a bit of risk there.
That's a brilliant point. I like that the idea of more people means more incomes, because I've seen that in one of my rentals. Didn't even know
Yeah.
the guy lost his job because he had someone else living there. And then the response I get from people is, well, what if you have to go through an eviction? The names of the people and being on a lease has nothing to do with an eviction, because the eviction is worded, here's the name of the people on the lease and all other adults living on the premises. That's in the verbiage of an eviction. So it can just get rid of that argument from that. Your third
Yep.
reason.
My third one is they built a boat but forgot to check the holes. And what I mean by that is in real estate, one of the things I don't love about it is there's a lot of folks out there that try to tell you to build this empire really quickly and get rich quick. And so what they do is they go and they buy 20 units in a very low income area that they have no idea about. Each unit is, $20,000. And then they find out there's a lot of holes in that in the process. So many of the tenants aren't paying rent, but they were on the rent roll saying that they had paid or something like that to get the property sold. So much of it is damaged. There's no leases in place. And so I think it's really important throughout the process that if something looks too good to be true that you're building so quickly, there's probably a lot of things that you don't know. I've personally made those decisions that were bad ones of like, oh, this deal looks so good. And then I purchase it and it's a development that never got built or something like that, and you lose a lot of money. You learn through the process. But I always find that iteration is going to be your friend. Start with something smaller. It starts working, double down on it versus going out and buying 10 properties initially and then learning that that was a big mistake.
Nice. So the start small and grow is a part of my live stream tonight, which is the power of the second house hack, right? I started with a duplex, then went to a
Oh, yeah.
fourplex. I learned
Yeah.
with the small one, and then I went to the bigger one. And the checking for the holes in the boat it's like, I think it was my second duplex, 2015. I was really brand new. Of course, I'm that new investor. I'm not paying an extra $200 to have you scope the sewage line. It's a city sewer. What could be wrong with it? And then I end up having to hydrojet and replace a part of the pipeline because roots had grown in to my side, not the
Wow.
city side, my side.
Yeah.
So check
That's
the holes on
expensive.
the boat, the things that can go wrong, right?
Yep.
So my third one, the thing I think that a lot of new investors do, and longtime investors seem to do this too, is they focus on the wrong things. And I find this when I'm doing the binder strategy where I get my tenants to ask me to raise the rent. Part of that is building the binder of looking up rental comps in my area. So I'll look at it and I'll go, well, those are bad pictures. That's a bad area. And then I'll also see that they're focused on the wrong thing in the description, right?
Yeah.
Brand new construction or only 5 years old and 1,400 square feet. And like I mentioned this earlier, these are things that landlords and owners think of. This is not something tenants think of.
Yeah.
How many times have you heard somebody say, well, I want to replace the cabinets and the countertops with this higher end stuff because that'll get higher rents? And in some markets it does, and in some markets it doesn't. So the lumberjack landlord invests in an area where higher end, better finishes gets more rent. I am in Washington, where a mobile home on acreage, as long as it's got 2 bedrooms, will rent for exactly the same as a 2-year-old stick built with the same number of bedrooms.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you put in it. So you have to understand area average rents. And I think some people focus on the wrong things. And that is, why would a tenant want to rent your property? How close is it to the commuting access to roads? What are the closest colleges? What are the closest hospitals? Is the base within commuting distance? What can you mention or what can you search for when you're looking for your property that will make it a desired rental? And figuring out what to focus on for your strategy is something that not everybody does. And so I've seen investors that have owned properties for a long time, and they sit there and they go, I don't understand why we're just not making money. Well, you're trying to fit the square peg in the round hole, and that property doesn't meet that strategy. So you bought wrong based
Yep.
on your end goal. Your fourth
Do you,
reason why investors fail with rentals?
do you recommend with those ones for them to sell them then?
Either sell or adjust your strategy. So there's a thing I take
Yeah.
from law enforcement. So I was only a cop for 8 years, right? So it's not like I had a 30-year career and everything I do is based on that. Um, but when a police officer shows up on scene, a cop can't go, I think this is what happened. Let me find the evidence to prove it. What an officer has to do is go, okay, I show up to the scene, I see what's in front of me, I see the evidence that here. From that evidence, I will formulate an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
When I find new evidence, change my opinion. So if you bought a property with the intent of, I want to do short-term rental in this area, and you don't get short-term, maybe you don't switch to long-term, you not cash flow, but what could you do midterm rental or rent by
Mm-hmm.
room, or what strategy would make that property work? Selling is an option, and at some point, yes, so I'm probably not the best person to say, like, I don't give relationship advice, parenting advice. I've messed all that up. I've never sold a property, so I wouldn't say you should sell or you should buy, but there has to be. Matt, the lumberjack landlord, sold one because the turnover was so high.
Mm-hmm.
The frustration, and Chester knows this quote better than I do. If the frustration to money ratio or something like that, it's money to BS or something, is imbalanced, then you sell or get rid of the property. But for me, it's find a strategy that would work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Great. My next one, very similar to just kind of these vibes and emotions we're talking about, is that they got a good vibe from the tenant, and the tenant just basically read the lease as you can pay rent optionally. And what I mean by that is that's if someone is a really good salesperson, they come to the showing and they're dressed nicely. They're your best friend. They make you feel like they are going to treat the property like the world and pay rent on time. You still need to look at all the objective criteria. Every single question in life, and maybe this is from being an entrepreneur, is always like, but why? And so making sure you are always running the background and credit check. If they're like, oh, my wife doesn't have to do it, it's like, well, what is she hiding then? And so I really think from that perspective, some of my worst tenants have been the ones that I thought were going to be the best. And some of my best tenants were ones where I was like, I'm not quite sure about this one. And they turned out to be the most delightful tenants. And objectively, they did have the highest criteria, like credit scores, et cetera. And so I would just mention have the most concrete lease. I mean, you referred to that earlier of like, you can just refer back to what the lease says. Nothing should be emotional. And then that will make your life a lot easier.
I totally agree. We made a video not too long ago on tenant red flags. And
Mhm.
one of the red flags was when they ask, do you self-manage? Or are you a property management company? Because they want to find somebody they can walk all over. And then the credit check on each tenant, I do it, even though one qualifies. It's how you do anything is how you do everything.
I love
And
that
so
quote.
if the spouse has a really bad credit score, it's going to bleed into everything else that they do. My fourth one and my last one, and then I think you have one or
One
two
more,
before
one
one more.
more.
Okay, before we get to the questions. And this one, I almost want to do this in a standalone video or in a video with the people I'm going to mention there, because
Okay.
I don't like to talk about people when they're not around to defend themselves. So this is a mistake investors make, but it's also a mistake I hear my friends making. And I say friends, I'm talking Zuber, lumberjack landlord. I don't know if I've heard Millennial Mike make this, but investor friends who have content. I don't see them making this mistake in their investing because, like I said, their portfolio is 10 times the size of mine. Their cash flow is 10 times the size of mine. So they're successful, but this is a mistake they make. And I hear it in videos. I actually heard it in a Zuber video the other day for 20 minutes. It was a
Mhm.
2 hour video with Jason, and 20 minutes of it was dedicated to this mistake that investors make. And they were talking about it like they were making it. And I just want to grab them and shake them and go, look, you're telling people something, but they're my friends. So I want to make this video with the three amigos sometime so I can give them a chance to defend themselves. But I hear investors go often, oh, it really sucks when you have a bad month and you have like 2 water heaters go out and you have to replace a roof. It's like that month just has no cash flow. That's not how this works at all. They know that's not how it works because they run the math and explain how it doesn't work, but they say this in conversation. So I hear investors say that. My brother, he says, I don't make any money in April or October because all my taxes are due then. So you run a business. Can you
Yep.
imagine saying, okay, only the income from this month can cover the expenses from this month?
Yeah,
Right? You'd absolutely go bankrupt that month and some month.
exactly.
So expenses do not impact cash flow. The first 6 months or year that you're investing, it'll feel like it because you haven't built the reserves. You're not collecting rent from tenants to build up a pile for when something goes wrong. But we talk about this off. So if you've ever watched any of my videos, anybody in the chat, that's watched my videos, you know that I say it's all the money coming in minus expenses, which is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And we set aside 15% for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. So in a high cost of living area, 15% is probably fine. But in Gary, Indiana, Millennial Mike sets aside over 20% for his expenses because
Yeah.
less, the roof costs almost the same, but the rent's less. So I'm setting aside 15%, which is about $60,000 a year. And then all of the repairs and maintenance, I think my biggest year outside of the Burr was probably $35,000 in expenses that year. That's years I did a roof and water heaters and some foundation work. So that 60,000, the money that you're setting aside covers those things. So when I heard Jason and Zuber and other people talking about, I just had a bad month and had all these expenses going, it's like I'm not making any money. No, you lack the discipline to do what you said when you bought the property. When you buy the property, you say, I'm going to pay the expenses and set aside for future repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. Did you do that? Because
Yep.
if you've done that, I can't wait. I'm excited when a tenant calls me and says, oh, the refrigerator went out. I'm not happy that the refrigerator went out. I want to give them some money for their food. The tenant's frustrated. I'm not happy for that. I'm happy that I've put money that the tenants gave me into an account that's going to put a brand new refrigerator. So I don't have to think about a refrigerator in that unit for 7 to 15 years. Or when
Yep.
the water heater goes out, the tenants are putting the water heater in because the money comes from the rent, not from cash flow, from the money we set aside. And I think a lot of investors go, I've got a big enough portfolio now, so I can buy this next property and the cash flow from the other properties will handle the problems. No, every single property you buy should be able to stand on its own with its own money being set aside to handle those repairs so that your cash flow is not impacted.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think a good parallel on that I've seen is also with purchasing, where you get over levered. I've seen that where there was like refinancing people with commercial loans. They refinanced all of their places to go purchase some more, but then they had this variable interest rate loan and their cash flow was barely there. And then it came to haunt them when interest rates went up. And so I couldn't agree more with that of you do need to think about every situation and make sure you have the reserves for each property independently. I'm very much about running a conservative ship like you from that perspective. So yeah.
One of my friends who doesn't understand how YouTube works just texted me and says, it's so cool. 3 or 4 years ago, you were watching BiggerPockets, and I just see you on YouTube right now in a live. You're a guest on somebody's show. So
You're like,
thanks for
this is
having me
my
here on
show.
your show, Dana. Exactly. And that's also a friend of mine who invested for 4 years and then retired on rentals. That's how smart and good he was
Wow.
with investing, but he doesn't get how YouTube works. It's great.
Yeah, yeah, but at least he's good with rentals.
Yep, that's the part that
What he
matters too.
needs.
And he's still on here watching to educate himself, so that's cool. Um, all right, let's go to the questions really quick.
Great.
Frank, old guy REI, who was at the Vegas event last year.
Yeah,
You probably saw him, super tall, had the shirt on, said he was part of the Dion REI disciples, which was a really cool compliment. But it's a question for you. If a
great.
tenant would like to pay their rent bi-monthly, is that possible on the Hemlane platform? And I think he means twice a month.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So I actually think it's really smart. There's some landlords on Hemlane who do it weekly. So there's a drop down where you can do monthly or weekly rent payments. And for tenants who get paid weekly and then go and spend it all, it's better to teach them the finances of every week you have to pay. So we've seen that. The drop down says monthly or weekly. However, if you have a tenant who pays twice a month, it's very easy. You just have two automated recurring requests. One is for the first of the month for 50%. The other is on the 15th of every month for 50%. And then the tenant can just go in and pay that or set it up on auto pay. But I do think for tenants who potentially are not as good with their finances, or the second they get a paycheck and their paychecks are weekly or something like that, that they spend it, I think this is a much better way to go to make sure that rent is their number one priority. So that's a great question.
No, it's cool that you have it set up that way. So I don't know if I've explained how I'm doing my portfolio, but as I buy or add a property, I'm putting it on the Hemlane platform.
Yeah.
And I think I had one tenant who was very tech savvy, and we just went to the Hemlane platform. But I've got a lady in her 70s who writes out 6 months worth of checks and has a flip phone. I'm not going to make her get internet service at her house to do Hemlane, right? So, but I've got one tenant that does pay twice a month. And it's probably because of they've got two income sources, right? One is, I think, like disability, and one is um, special needs family members or something. I don't know. He's tried to explain it to me. I don't care, because he was in the property when I bought it. So,
Okay.
and when I first acquired it, like every month we had this conversation of him struggling to come up with rent. It was never late, but it was every time it was a struggle. I had to reach out. And then I just asked, I said, why is it such a struggle? And he says, man, if I could just do half now and like half on the 17th, it'd be so easy. I said, well, let's do that. So his lease is structured twice a month payment, and he's never had to talk to him about it since, right? I've had other conversations, but
yeah, there's so much about how you structure things. I think that are smart. And once you have a good structure in place, you can just repeat it as you purchase more rentals.
yeah. And so a couple things there. One, a landlord should never be waiting for rent to come in to make the mortgage payment, because that's a thing that would make you fail quickly.
Yes.
But sometimes if you make an adjustment, like, so I've got the guy who pays twice a month, and then I've got other people who pay, like, the rent's due on the 8th, not on the 1st, because they get just Social Security and a pension comes on like the 5th. So if it's due on the 8th, there's plenty of time for that to come in if there's a weekend or something. You can make small adjustments to make it easier on your tenant, which ultimately, since you never have to have the problem with them again, makes it easier on you.
Yep.
A question from Frank. If I go with Hemlane, and I actually know the answer to this, but I'll let you answer it because you'll do it better. This is one of the reasons why I use Hemlane. Do you have a network of contractors or handy people, or do I need to bring my own?
We do. It also depends on where your property is. So when you go into the system for our 24/7 repair coordination packages, you type in your address and it will tell you, yes, this can be serviceable on what we call complete, or no, you'd have to bring your own network. Sort of as a rule of thumb, if it's in an MSA over 100,000 in population, we will have the trades there. And it's multiple plumbers, multiple electricians, making sure that we have the emergency, both evening and weekend support, all of that built into there. But if we don't have it, because it's a small town like Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, where population is 5,000, we'll let you know that. And then you can still use our services. You would just bring your own contractors.
And make sure you check your area. An example is, I own a duplex in McKenna, Washington, a population of, when I purchased 600, now it has about 450. So it looks like a massive population decline. But McKenna, Washington,
What happened? Yeah.
It's adjacent to Joint Base Lewis McCoy. Part of it was annexed.
Yep.
So
Okay.
annexation made the
Population decline.
that city's population
Yeah.
change, right? Yeah. But it's right next to Joint Base Lewis McCord. So the demand is there. The handymen and contractors are there, so it would work in that area. So even if you're in a small place, check to see if it would work there, because it's also close enough to larger areas.
Yeah, that's a good point. When we say MSA, there's a radius. It's like a 360 radius on the population within that area. So it's looking at the whole population, not just necessarily of that town. So that's a very good point.
Michelle, the person I talked about, who was also at the Vegas event, who just closed,
Yeah.
I say just, but it's been months now, closed on a 1031, purchased a couple duplexes. This is doing amazing. I think is close to retiring, but I don't think she realizes that she's close to retiring. Asks, I heard scammers are removing our watermarks from posting our properties. How does Hemlane address this? What do you recommend?
Wow. Okay. So it is so Hemlane, if the property's on Hemlane, people don't know this, but when you first click to advertise it, we've already, as you're filling out the listing description, we have a security team that's checking who is this person posting. Everything from IP to their phone number to who's on the deed of the property, all of that. And so there's this back end huge process that they follow that you don't know. And so we know and guarantee on the Hemlane platform, the properties listed there are truly the owners or the managers. And some people might get frustrated by that because if it's like a property manager will ask for the contracts, we'll look through certain things just to make sure that when they list it, we have no fraud on the platform. We have seen certain situations where, let's just say we posted on Hemlane, that someone will take that listing and then post it elsewhere. However, there's two things to keep in mind. First is it's a very low chance of that happening with Hemlane because all of our listing partners, so like the Redfins of the world, apartment.com, Zillow, they only allow the posting once. If they see it twice on there, they're going to say, this looks like a scam or fraud, especially if it's a second posting from an there's unreputable softwares out there that just kind of let everyone list. And then it's a wild, wild west. And so that's the first thing is like, it's very rare that that would happen. Where we do see them sometimes put the listings is actually on Craigslist. And so Craigslist is the one that really is the wild, wild west, and anyone can do it as long as you have an email link. But a lot of times when they do, they're actually not really searching for our properties that are active, and they know someone's going out to do the showings or that we have identity verification and the properties we're trying to reduce days on market. A lot of times a scammer, their process is driving around the neighborhood or figuring out what might be abandoned. And then they go through and post those properties and try to collect the money. And so with the exception of Craigslist, all the other websites are very good of like, hey, if someone asks for a holding deposit and you haven't seen it, haven't met the person, most likely it's a scam. And so there has been scams. It's very, very rare that it would happen with Hemlane. And if it were to happen, which I think the cases are so low that it's not even a rounding error in any sense, I think that would most likely be through Craigslist because they are not as good at verification.
Yeah, and even so, I'm glad that Hemline does that. Even the verification that Zillow does. If Michelle, if you list on Zillow, just their go on their platform to list it, the very first time you list on their platform, they don't verify that you're the owner of the property. They make you have a phone call to verify that you're a human. They're just trying to
Hmm.
stop the bots
Yeah.
from creating the listings.
Yeah.
So they're not doing a very good job of doing that. And the way of stopping scammers, it's never going to happen. They're going to take pictures. They can take the watermarks out. They can put their
Yeah.
watermark over it. They could do different things. The two things to really worry about with a scam is if you have a place that is going to be turned over, so you have it listed to rent, so there's nobody there. The scammers know, and this is their window of opportunity. So one, splurge on Wi-Fi, put in something like an Arlo account, put in
Mhm.
Arlo camera so you know if somebody's there. And Michelle, you're like me, you invest primarily in small multifamily. You can communicate with the existing tenants. You just tell them, hey, I'm going to be doing an open house Saturday from 1 to 3, showing the other unit to people, just to let you know there's going to be traffic there. If anybody shows up before then, what can you let me know? It's just a little
Yeah.
message like that at the end of your, because you have people living on the property already, unless all of your units are vacant at the same time.
Yeah. And that's what I love about multifamily is you do have sets of ears and eyes on the ground. And that's where scammers usually they're looking for something that isn't multifamily. Or if it is like a duplex where both units are vacant.
Julie has a question. Howdy, Julie. How many employees does Hemlane have? I would do a class that Hemlane put on if it was in my area. So last I
Great.
heard, Julie, you had moved to Texas. So there you go. How many employees does Hemlane have, and what kind of classes do you guys put on?
Yeah, great question, Julie. Would love to connect with you. So we have over 60 at the company that are full time, and then we have a lot of contractors as well that bring that up to over 100 with different contractors that we're using. As far as travel, we do travel for events to give classes, education, all of that on property management, how to mitigate risk, all that kind of fun stuff, as well as just the data and insights that we see in the industry as well.
All right, so this is a question you can answer better than I did because I'm no
Okay.
longer working. Ninja Vanish, who's in the chat often, all the time. Just checking out my brokerage accounts, debating on how much to put towards my 401k, Roth IRA next year might max them out.
Yeah.
Do you do retirement accounts for your Hemlane employees?
Yes. So they can put it into a retirement account. And then obviously a big fan of self-directed IRAs. There's a bit more to it, especially with the custodian, that there's additional costs associated with that. And so, employees starting out just out won't do that. But there are the 401ks, correct?
So Ninja Vanish, with me and retirement accounts, when I didn't know how to invest or ever buy a rental, I maxed them out because I thought I was getting tax benefits. Once I realized I could buy rentals and get a good return, I can invest it for the match. And then
Hmm.
I dropped to just the match so that I can go for real estate. And not until I had 5 properties and really strong confidence in my ability to get a return in 2020 did I empty out retirement accounts and buy a triplex. And then I think I contributed a little bit more until I retired. I emptied them out too.
Yeah.
So where are you at in your investing? How does your, confidence level on getting a return and at least get the match? Michelle has a question on the additional people living in the rental. What if the tenant doesn't admit to them living there? They just visit all the time.
Well, I mean, Dion, I'd love your opinion. Honesty is really important to me. And having a relationship with the tenant where they can be fully honest with me about what's going on. And so if they're saying this person's just visiting, but clearly they don't live here, and you're saying no, clearly they do live there. They're there every single day. They're not visiting every day. Then I think you might potentially want to change your strategy. You might want to encourage, say, hey, it's okay if you have extra people living in the place. It's really to your benefit that we add them to the lease agreement as like a lease amendment. And so really encouraging them to be honest with you, rather than making them feel like they have to hide something. Because I think in any relationship, and this may be a bit of common sense, once the trust is broken, it's really hard to bring back. And once they lie about something, they'll lie about other things. And so really setting the precedent that I want you to be fully honest with me about everything going on.
I will have a contrarian view.
Okay,
This is
great.
what I'm known for
I'm
amongst the three
excited.
amigos. Uh, Almost like the military from the 80s and 90s. Don't
Okay.
ask, don't tell.
Okay.
Um, Michelle, if all of the utilities are in the tenant's name and you know the persons that are often, do you care? That's the thing. So here's the sentence. I said this at the beginning, but I forgot to put the sentence in here. A lot of times when I'm talking to tenants and they go about painting an accent wall or um, I don't know, making some change outside or whatever, how clean the inside of the house is or who lives there. I tell the tenants, you live here. I don't. Now, if it's outside and it makes a mess and it impacts other tenants in another unit, or if they're super loud and it impacts tenants in another unit, sure, take action. But on the people living there, if some of the utilities are in your name and you see those costs going up, instead of doing a flat fee, backdate 1 month and say, here's a copy of the bill for the water or the electric. Your amount is going up based on the extra people at your house. And when they say, well, they just visit, well, they visit enough to impact the utilities. So it's not so much that I care that they tell me that they're there, they tell me who lives there. I'm more worried about, I mean, the honesty thing is huge. So and the next question here is, what do we check for on credit score? Do you look for 650 and up? I don't look at what someone makes. I've never gone and done a comparison of 1 time, 2 times, 2.5 times the rent or anything. I don't even know what that ratio would be with my tenants because I don't care about income. I check credit score and evictions. Since I don't check income, I go for a high credit score of 700, but I'm flexible based on credit history, right? So it's 700 is the goal. If somebody has medical from a year ago, for bankruptcy from less than 7 years ago, so they can't do it again for a period of time, like I'll consider a lower score to a point. But the honesty thing does get to me. So the lying thing, it's kind of why I just allow pets, because I figure they'll show up with an ESA and it gives them a reason to lie.
Anyway, yeah.
Right. But when I have a tenant apply, I verify their work. Don't care about their income. And I don't use the provided information. Like they'll give you the name of where they work, the name of their manager, and the phone number. I want the name of the company. I find the company online, ask for HR, and verify employment with somebody that isn't the person that was supplied, because it's too easy to lie. So if they supply the information and I can verify that they work there through another source, it was a chance to catch them in a lie early enough to not start the relationship with that tenant.
Yeah, I love that. I would say I have a slightly different take, contrarian as well. Yours was on the line or the number of people in the property. Mine is on credit. I found that tenants with 700 credit can a lot of times be purchasing a property, or they have so much credit history that they've built it up enough. For me, it depends on the property, but I will take credit. Usually it's 620, because at 640 you can buy a house. It's usually at 620. I'll make exceptions. I would rather have no credit than bad credit. So if you have two people living in the place, one person has a credit score of, 635, another has zero credit because they're just starting out, they're 22, 23. I would prefer, because then that means they don't pay things with a credit card because they physically can't. So there are certain things like that I take into account. And then to your point, Dion, I do not take anyone who has evictions, because if they have eviction on their record, not only did they go to court, but they lost, right? Most evictions are not on records, because most times you talk to landlords, say, I can't pay, I'm going to leave. And, it doesn't ever go to court. And so if it goes to court and it's physically on your record, that means the tenant was in the wrong and was so catty and challenging to work with that they took it all the way to court rather than just coming up with some termination. So that's why I just take no excuses with evictions.
Yeah, no, evictions, I don't care if it started with an 1800 as far as the timeline. I don't care how long ago it was. They've figured out how to use the system to get free rent from somebody and force them to go all the way through it. So this will be the last question, because I know you got to run here in a second. Christopher Ryan, well, two questions quick. Christopher Ryan says, how the heck did your friend retire after 4 years? He did value add. He was buying properties and putting on RV pads. So 4 years got him to what he needed. And question for you, are you going, this is from Chester, are you going to be at the One Rental at a Time February event?
I am going to be there. I'm so excited. So if you want to meet in person, grab coffee. I know there's those backing out areas too. Please reach out to me, because I'd love to meet in person.
Awesome. Perfect. I'm really looking forward to that. And everybody who is here in the chat, thank you, Dana, for sharing your information with us. And it's good when we have those contrarian views, because both opinions matter. And honestly, I think some of this, your opinion probably matters more than mine with the data that you have, because mine is, I've only been doing this myself, right? I don't have a platform with thousands and thousands of landlords on it. So it's really cool when you come on here and share. And if somebody wants to reach out, it's Dana, DANA at Hemlane. You can see it on the screen there, .com.
Yep.
And if you want a discount on your first year of Hemlane, you can put Dion Talk in as the code, and 20% off your first year.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. And for everybody else, I hope to see you 4 o'clock today for the live stream on the power of the second house hack.
Thanks for having me.
And we are off of YouTube now.
I thought you were going to say until next time.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, right. Exactly.
I was waiting.